Our final video, what I want to do is talk about experimental research. And if you look back to our video on correlations, this kind of extends that a little bit more and kind of is a good transition into discussing experimental research. So experimental research often incorporates going to a lab, but it doesn't always do. And the purpose of an experiment is to determine cause and effect, because correlations, like we talked about, correlation does not mean causation, and it's not very good at determining cause and effect. So in an experimental study, you have what's called the independent variable, and that's one of the things that the experimenter changes. It's the only thing that they change. And the experimental group includes people that are getting some kind of intervention, and then the control group is to be compared to the experimental group, and they don't get the intervention or treatment at all. And so they determine, is whatever they're doing going to better than not doing anything at all. And there's also different levels of control groups, and I'll get into that in a minute. And then the dependent variable is, what is the outcome variable? So if you were looking at a psychotherapy intervention to help with depression, then the outcome variable would be depressive symptoms. You know, if it was new antidepressant, depressive symptoms would be the outcome variable, right? And so the fundamental question of experiments is, does the experimental and control groups differ in the dependent variable score? And like I said, experiments always happen, usually not always, but usually happen in a laboratory. So, God, my hair is messed up. All right, so let's go to the next slide. So I'm going to give you an example of an experiment, right? So let's just say that Cinnamon Toast Crunch is trying to say that their cereal, it makes children less likely to be aggressive, right? Because Cinnamon Toast Crunch is freaking delicious. So of course, like, you know, it's going to make children less aggressive, right? So children all go to the same room where they're recorded. So experiments are all about control. They all go into this laboratory and they arrive at the same time in the same place and eat out of the same bowl with the same type of spoon. They get the same type of milk. They get the same type of everything. The only difference is that the experimental group gets the Cinnamon Toast Crunch and the control group gets a sandwich. Okay, so and the dependent variable is children are then put into a room and behind plated glass where the children can't see through the glass, but the experimenters can see, and they're like taking notes. And every time the kid gets aggressive, they mark a point and say, okay, that kid hit somebody, or that kid pushed someone, or that kid did something aggressive, they mark a point. So that's your dependent variable. How many aggressive actions happen? So that could be an example of an experiment, right? So uh, they may want to take this a step further, right, in the independent variable group, because if they find something significant, right, they find that, oh, he ate a bowl of Cinnamon Toast Crunch, and these people did better, have less aggressive actions. They may say, well, maybe cereal in itself is makes you less aggressive, and not the Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Or maybe eating a sandwich makes you more aggressive than and that's why they had, you know, that's why it wasn't that the Cinnamon Toast Crunch reduced aggression, right? So maybe what they'll put in is they'll have another control group where they eat a different type of cereal. Like maybe they'll eat Kashi instead of Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Ugh, Kashi. So that is another example. And then there's you know, control group where they eat nothing, and maybe they'll find that, hey, maybe just eating something reduces the aggression. So then they'll do the same thing with the dependent variable and put them all into a room. Um, and so if these people from Cinnamon Toast Crunch and they're like, our cereal's already delicious, kids all are obviously already want it, but we're gonna even make it more, we're gonna market this to parents that it reduces aggression. And so they may unconsciously, because they want to get good results, put children that they perceive as being more aggressive into the other control groups, and put the children that they perceive as being less aggressive into the Cinnamon Toast Crunch group. And so the groups that are less aggressive, so as a result, that's going to influence the study, right? If the experimenter's kind of, you know, playing God and putting people into different groups, that is going to affect the results, right? And then what about if the kid, you know, is eating Cinnamon Toast Crunch and they look over their shoulder and they see another kid, and that other kid is eating, you know, Kashi? they're gonna be like, oh yeah, I got Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Or the other kid may say, oh, why did I get Kashi, man? I want Cinnamon Toast Crunch. And then they may get upset and get frustrated and be like, well, this is bull crap. And then they may start fights with people and then get higher aggressive levels. It's not because eating the Cinnamon Toast Crunch actually helps. It's just that they're getting jealous. So the participants or the people in the study, if they know that they're getting something, they know they're getting the treatment, that can also affect the results of the study, right? So you have to do this thing called the double blind procedure, and it's basically this idea that they hire a third party, and the third party randomly assigns participants to the control and the experimental group. So the experimenter is blind; they don't know who's getting into what participants are in the experimenter and what experimental and what participants are in the control group. And the participants also don't know if they're in the experimental or control group. So it doesn't influence the results of the study. And like I said, random assignment is randomly assigning all the participants to the experimental or control group. So it's not like you're actively selecting who's going in what specific group, right? So this is a repeat slide. It kind of says the same thing, but you see this a lot with randomized controlled trials for studies with drugs. So like if you have this great new antidepressant, the experimental group is going to get the antidepressant drug, and the control group is going to get the placebo pill, which is basically a pill of water or sugar that does absolutely nothing. But the participant has no idea that this pill is absolutely doing nothing. The person may think, oh, I'm getting the actual pill. And so that may affect their performance. We know that the placebo effect is actually very strong. That's called the placebo effect. When you think the treatment's working, it actually does have a benefit. And we found that actually the placebo effect is very strong. And so that's why they do the placebo effect, because it teases out that part of people thinking, oh, this is working, and it's working. So it teases that part out and really finds the effect of the actual drug. So the single blind procedure is when it's not possible for the researcher to not know who's getting in what treatment. So that's called the single blind procedure. So let's give an example. So Dr. Jill Johnson is studying the effects of her psychotherapy technique designed to decrease depressive symptoms in young adults. Dr. Johnson pays volunteers at a university clinic $50 to participate in the study who all have depression. Half are male and half are female. About 50% of the participants who completed the 8-week therapy session, while 100% in the control group remained in. So the experimental group received some of Dr. Johnson's therapy, whereas the control group got some psychoeducation on depression and strategies to cope with it. And so their depressive symptoms were measured before the treatment and then 3 months after. And Dr. Johnson concludes that my therapy worked with everybody and it was better than the control group. What are some issues with Dr. Johnson's study? Well, we can look right here. So Dr. Johnson, only 50% of the people that entered the study actually went through with it. And that's a big issue with studies that do treatment and control. People drop out of the study. And so basically what her study says is, of the people that were suffering through her treatment and got through it, not saying they suffered through it, but all the people that got through it did see improvement, but half the people dropped out. So the treatment may not be as effective because a lot of the people that did the study are dropping out. And this is what's called attrition, ATTRITION. And so the placebo technique was actually good at at keeping people in the study. So one of the things that you want to think about is the attrition rate. How many people dropped out of the study? And Dr. Johnson, if she's writing this up in her her paper or whatever, she's going to have to talk about, okay, how can we change this study or change the treatment so that people want to stay in the study more and people don't drop out. But that's true with any type of study. You want to look at the attrition rate. It's very important because it's a commentary on how effective the treatment really is. Because a lot of times studies will talk about how effective the treatment is, but they leave out the attrition part. So thank you so much for watching this video. Remember to check the link in the video description to take a practice test that I made using Learn My Test. Thank you so much for watching this video.